all stars shine because of these reactions, and that's like what scientists are trying to create now on Earth. So create a sun here on Earth. It's a bit of a different process than the one is happening in the stars, but it's a really fascinating field of research. It's really interesting, also from like a scientific standpoint, but the impact it will have on humanity, and if we like manage to make it happen, to make it stable, and then to commercialize it and spread it all around the world, like build these nuclear fusion reactors, it will really change the course of humanity, and we will have another source of energy that's really powerful instead of like fossil fuel. So
hello and welcome yet to another episode of Soph Rants. I know it's been too long, I'm to blame, but honestly, there weren't any good and interesting conversations until now. So I have Bojana today with me, and Bojana, introduce yourself.
hello, thank you for inviting me, Sophie. I'm really happy to be here and to have this conversation with you. As you know, we had like great conversations from the moment we met, so I'm really happy to be here and like share it with everyone else. So as Sophie said, my name is Bojana. I'm from Skopje, from Macedonia. I'm a student in Slovenia and I study astrophysics. So yeah, that's honestly the one thing people remember the most about me, what I study. So yeah, that's a short introduction, and you'll get to know me more in this episode.
How did you come up to study astrophysics, man? Like that is just freaking revolutionary, if you ask me. Like you don't really get to see a lot of young women studying astrophysics nowadays.
Yeah, honestly, I've always loved science. My parents are both into that field. So my father is an engineer, mechanical engineer. My mom is a chemist. So I think since I went to school, like I was always into math and physics, and I've been going to like mathematics competition since I was like 6 years old. So I always knew that I will go into science, but I was never sure like what exactly. And I've been saying that I'm gonna study physics since I was 10. Like even before like I started studying physics in school, I was like, I'm gonna finish two universities. One of that will be physics, one something else, that I will find along the way. And honestly, astronomy like came a bit later, let's say in the picture, like first year in high school. As you know, it's not a subject in school, so it's not something I got a chance to study in school. And in first year in high school, I was like really thinking about what I want to do in the future. And I'm the type of person that's like really wants to know like where I'm headed, what are my plans for the future. I really think long term. And I was like really, that was the time like I couldn't sleep. I was like, I have to find what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. And I just like, it was very random. Like I was going home one night and I just like thinking what I'm gonna do, and I looked up in the sky, and I saw these like three stars in Orion. And I was like, well, as a child, I was like really interested in astronomy. So let me try and like explore this passion again. So I signed up for this course that's about like the basics of astronomy. And since then, like my journey started, and I started like learning more and more. And I got really interested in that. So I kind of combined it with that passion for physics, and that's how I ended up studying astrophysics.
That is just a really beautiful story. What is really interesting, guys, for those of you that are going to see this as video, you can actually see a little NASA bottle in the background. So
Yes,
that's something.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
why don't
have like a NASA
you take
bottle, and
it?
this is like I have this like trophy from NASA Space Apps that I was like last year that we won like second place, and this is like the Andromeda Nebula. So yeah, I'm owing the spirit of astronomy.
I do have to ask. This is probably the stupidest question you're ever gonna get, but how many people confuse studying astronomy and astrology? Like, how much does that happen to you?
Almost like all the time. Like at least 90% of the people are like, "Oh, studying astrology, like, what do you know about horoscope? And I'm like, it's not that. Sometimes I'm like tired of arguing and I'll just like go with the flow and be like, yeah, 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 I'm studying astrology. And I don't even correct them. But if I'm in a more like serious conversation, I would be like, no, that's not what astrophysics means.
Oh my god. Wow. Well, that's definitely interesting. And like since we're in the same boat as in people who are Macedonian and studying in Ljubljana, how did that treat you? Like did you have any difficulties with the language, with the culture, with the people? How does it all go with you? How does it work?
Well, honestly, for me, it's an interesting experience, probably very different from yours because, like, I've been in Slovenia for a year and a half, and for that year and a half, 1 year has been during the pandemic. So, definitely a different experience than yours. Um, Slovenia wasn't my first choice, to study. I really wanted to go to the US, but unfortunately, I wasn't accepted in like 19 universities. They all rejected me.
Oh.
I know that was like the biggest heartbreak of my life. And it was more of like my parents convincing me. They were like, do not stay in Macedonia, go abroad. And we had this like meeting from like the university that I'm studying right now, the University of Nova Gorica, and they came to our high school and talked about their programs. And I saw that they have this great astrophysics program. So yeah, that's why I decided to go there. Honestly, it was really difficult for me to get used to it. I thought of myself as a really flexible person. I was like, it's gonna be fine. I'm gonna get used to any environment that I'm in, but it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be because like I live in Skopje, which is a huge city, and suddenly I was in this much smaller city because my faculty of science and like the research institute is not actually in Nova Gorica, but it's in this small town called Aidovčina, which has like 5,000 people. It's like almost a village, and I'm suddenly going from Skopje with all the traffic, with all the noise, and I'm going on this like small town, and it was really hard to get used to. When it comes to the language, it wasn't an issue because my faculty is in English. Most of the professors are international, so they come from Italy, from Russia, from like all over the world, and there is a lot of international students as well. So when it comes to like the studying, it wasn't as difficult. But yeah, it was really a challenge to get used to like the Slovenian culture and definitely living in a smaller town.
Wow. Well, I'm really surprised. Like, that is a fact that I didn't know about you, that you got rejected from 19 schools in the US. This is going to be a really painful subject to you, but like, let's talk about that. Like, were you like fully filled with hope? Like, what happened? Like, what were your feelings? How did you feel? Like, was your self-confidence brushed?
Honestly, like for me, it was a really big deal. And as I said, it was really heartbreaking because like I was planning to go into the US. Like I was raised with the idea to leave the country. And I wanted to go in the US since I was 10. I was a competitive swimmer for around 10, 11 years. And like watching the 2012 Olympics, and seeing like the US swimmers dominate, like they're the best in the world, and there is no doubt in that. And I was like, I'm definitely going to the US because for a lot of Macedonian swimmers, that's the destination, where they want to continue both with their studies, but especially with their swimming career. And that's why like was like solely focused on the US. I was like not even looking at any other universities anywhere else in the world. I was just like, I'm gonna go to the United States, and that's it. And yeah, as I said, I applied to like 19 universities. And honestly, I was like, of course, I was hopeful, that was my dream. Like, it was like a lot of universities. So you're hoping that at least like one of
Mm, yeah.
them accepts you. And then when the rejection letters came, I was like, honestly, like so heartbroken. I remember the last universities, like the last letters came in the morning, because of the time difference zone.
Yeah.
And it was like 5 in the morning, and I know I woke up and I was just like looking at everything, and I got like so upset. And I packed, literally, I had this box, and I took all my medals, I took all my like certificates that I had, put them in the box, and I was like, I'm throwing all of this away, because I felt like it was all for nothing. And the good thing, I would say, in the same time, that like that same day, later in the afternoon at like around 10, we were actually going for a school trip. So yeah, I was like, the next 10 days I was on a school trip, and I was with like all of my friends. I was studying in Yahya, and we were like, because we were a small school, we were like really like tight community. We were very close with our professors. We were very close between each other. So I had like a lot of my friends who were also rejected, and it suddenly didn't feel like such a big deal. Like we were all together. I had friends who were accepted at someplace else. I had friends who were also accepted in the US, and I was like super proud of them, because like they deserve that. And it just like, it didn't feel like such a big deal. Like I really thought that it's like the end of my life. I was like, no one is gonna respect me after that. Like no one's gonna care. And it's like that whole trip like proved that I was wrong about it. And it was still hard, but because of like the circumstance, I was just like feeling a bit better. I was like, this is not, because as I said, like I've been competing for since I was a child. And for me, a lot of my self-worth came from like place of accomplishment and like being first and being the best. And suddenly when I didn't get what I wanted my whole life, I felt like I'm not worthy anymore of like friendships or love. And again, like it's not like that whole idea just completely disappeared after that trip, but it like proved me that I'm wrong, and that like I had something to work towards too. So yeah, I feel like it was, as much that there was bad, like there was like these happy circumstances, lucky circumstances that didn't make me feel as bad as I would otherwise would. And honestly, now I feel more like it was a blessing, because like with everything happening, I just like cannot imagine being in the US, so far away during the pandemic. And now I'm like, okay, maybe it was a good thing, I wasn't accepted. Like at the time, I had people like my professors telling me, Buena, there is like a good in this. It's how it was supposed to be. And I was like, no, I don't accept that. And now I'm like, maybe they were right. Like maybe there was something good in, not getting accepted.
Well, that, like, first of all, I found so many interesting points in this conversation. First of all, the way you just explained it, that going on that field trip made your failures, a lot less. Like, that is something that's very interesting. Like, we get into this way of thinking, pattern of thinking, where we're like, okay, I'm not good enough because other people made it. But what happens when other people don't make it? You immediately feel better, and you're like, okay, so I'm not the only one who got like rejected. Everyone got rejected. But that is just so interesting, because it only has to be people who are in a way close to you. Because if you're like, oh, Steve Jobs failed, or like Bill Gates failed, then you're like, but I'm not Bill Gates. Like, none of my people around me are Bill Gates. And I just find that so fascinating that we relate to failure in such a personal manner. Second of all, you mentioned about the pandemic and all of that. Man, I completely agree, dude. Like, I don't know, even being in Portugal and not knowing anyone last year during the pandemic, it was definitely a new kind of an experience, which wasn't really the best. And I also had surgery exactly on this day. Basically, this is the day I got admitted to the hospital. And what was the third point? Like, you mentioned something, that you felt like you're not worthy of love, and that's so interesting. Like, whenever we have a failure in our lives, we feel that because of that failure everything else is wrong, although things between each other are completely not connected. Like, you not getting into 19 different universities has nothing to do with the way that you're being loved. But it's just it's such an intricacy, it's so connected to each other, it is just completely weird. But I mean, except for the school trip, how, you know, how did you went around that failure at that time, except for the school trip? Okay, so you were there for 2 weeks, wherever you are, and what happened then?
Well, honestly, like as I said, like it's not like I came back and suddenly everything was fine. I still, it took a lot of time to for me to accept it and be like, okay, this is like not that bad, you know. As I said, like I remember, I would like tell you this like specific situation. I remember like when I went to Slovenia, so this happening after like 4 or 5 months after like I got rejected, and we're doing our first like colloquium, and I got a 9. It was in like physics one, and I got a 9. It was like for a half or like a point. I would have had a 10, and for me that was like that was it. I remember I went like to my dorm room and I cried for the entire day, and for me it was just like confirming that like if you know this university that I didn't even appreciate as much, like if I cannot be the best here and have a 10 here, like maybe they were right to not accept me. And it was so hard to like deal with all of that. So um it took a lot of time, like honestly, to just be like, as you said, like not connect that one single failure to like questioning my whole like value and be like there is more to me than just like my grades or just like my awards or competitions. And I guess that was something that was good in Slovenia because again I was like in this small town. There was not this high pace. There was not, I was so used to going to competitions or doing projects and like being constantly awarded. And now I didn't have that for almost a year and a half, and it was like I had to like re-examine myself and like find like just like disconnect myself from that idea that like I need to be awarded or that I need like external praise or recognition to see my worth. And again, that's why I say like I feel like I've grown so much in like 2020, and like it's what I guess like what came good out of that whole year. So even from like that failure, I think I've learned so much and grown so much as a person that I wouldn't have the chance otherwise. So yeah, I'm kind of grateful that it happened.
What are, like, now I'm completely fascinated, like, what are the steps in a way, like, can you just elaborate a little bit on what are the steps that you made on the disconnecting part? Like, how did you do that? Like, was it just a change in a mindset, or did you actually actively participate into changing, I don't know, some habits or something like that?
Well, honestly, for me, like it's I don't think there were I can like number specific like steps in
One.
this is what I planned to do and this is what I did. It didn't came like about like that. It was honestly like really questioning like my viewpoint, my mindset, and being like, okay, this is like understanding where it all comes from. Why am I like? Why do I have these values? And then just like seeing how can I improve. And it's not like now it's not the same, but like now when I recognize, like I can say like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, like something like that, I had a driving license exam and then I failed. Like that was my second time, and I just again felt that like, oh my god, I'm a complete failure and everything. And I just like it was more like I learned to recognize these patterns that like I'm thinking and be like, that's not it. And sometimes it like I will still feel that way, but I consciously try to like tell myself that's not the truth, like there is so much more. And just like it's more like trying to talk to myself again and be like there is so much more, and like it's not like I failed my exam, like driving license exam is the end of the world and suddenly like I'm a complete failure as a person. It just was like that, just one thing. And again, I would say like just being more aware, trying to understand like where it all comes from. Why do I have like this uh, pattern of like thought, and then like try to contradict it. And it's not like it's an easy thing, but like sometimes it's something you have to do and be like, okay, it's not like that. And literally, I always joke that like since I went to Slovenia, that I see adulting as like parenting yourself. And it's something like it's so funny. Like we were talking this also with my friends, that like what I say to myself, like internally, it's something I am like I'm speaking to a child. And like it's literally like that, even for like more basic examples. Like I would go to the store and I'm literally telling myself, go buy fruits and vegetables, don't buy snacks, don't buy unhealthy food. And it's like I'm hearing my parents talking to me, and these are like the things that I'm now telling myself. So yeah, as I said, like they're not concrete steps, just
you are
like being
you are
myself.
talking to your inner child. So
Yeah,
I mean, I personally believe in energy, and I mean, I have amethyst on me right now. So it is that you're talking to your inner child, and it is actually scientifically proven that the way you talk to yourself is the way that you think about yourself. So even if you're like gaslighting yourself just even slightly, that brings on the negative emotions and negative way of perceiving yourself, and etc etc. And this is just so fascinating to me, because right now I am going through something similar in a way, because right now everything in my life is great. My love life is fine, my career is fine, my friendships are completely fine, like with the whole pandemic and everything. But there's just this one part of me that just doubts everything. What if everything crumbles and just stops existing tomorrow? What if I'm not good enough? What if this is going to end? What if my friends leave me? What if the guy I'm dating leaves me? Like all of this, like constant overthinking. And I was just like, you know what? No, we're not going to do this. This has been a pattern throughout my life, all the time, and I've constantly been like, okay, this is going to end, this is going to end, this is going to end, this is going to end. And of course, because I had that type of thinking pattern of thinking, all of the things in my life have, come to an end. But when you start to change your mindset, and that is something like, that's where first of all I started journaling. And as a writer, journaling is extremely difficult, because when I try to journal, it actually comes to, poetic expression of feelings, which is basically my work. But I try to like focus a little bit more on just writing everything that just comes to mind. And it has helped me so much. Like I've been doing weekly reflections for 3 months now, and it just puts things into perspective. Have you ever done journaling, by the way?
yeah, I have. I'm journaling right now, but it's just like it's very difficult for me. Like I'm trying to be. I feel like all of this is just like connected to mindfulness and being more like mindful of like everything. And I think like journaling helps with that. Just like understanding your feelings and emotions and like thoughts and where it all comes from. But it's like a really difficult thing. I'm trying to build it into a habit, but it's like I'm not as consistent as I want it to be, because like sometimes I'm like, I have nothing, to say about this day, or just like forget, or something like happens. So yeah, I'm definitely trying to build it into a habit, but it's not concrete habit yet.
That's awesome. Like I have some recommendations there. Like what I usually do is I have daily prompts and I have weekly prompts, and that really helps. Like I may it's not really a habit for me as well. It's yeah, actually it is. I think it is kind of a habit now. But basically, I've forced myself into seeing the good in every day. There has to be one thing that is the best thing about that day. And it can be something really basic. Like, I don't know, for the last 2 weeks, it was like, having candlelight dinner and just dancing on Debussy for 20 minutes and just looking him in the eyes, or going to a party with my best friends and just, talking to each other and having valuable conversations. Probably the best day for me today is going to be this podcast, because I haven't recorded a podcast in like 3 months. And all of those things, like, you train your mind to not only to, it's like a yin and yang, man. It's basically a yin and yang. Like, this whole conversation is yin and yang. You force yourself to see the good even in the bad things, because yeah, we're going through a pandemic for a year and a half now already, and there's just so much shit going on everywhere, and especially in Macedonia. Like, I know that things are really really bad there, and you just have to find something, not only find something that's worth living for, but something worth fighting for, something worth doing things for. And another thing that is extremely connected to journaling is basically gratitude. Like, one of the things for me that got me out of depression was gratitude. I wake up every morning, make my bed, and just do a gratitude session, just like, and just, I am grateful for. And usually it's the same things over and over again, but that really puts into perspective of how much of things you have. Like, and I'm not talking only about material things. I'm talking about cultural capital. I'm talking about people capital, about social stuff. Like, I'm talking about everything. I'm healthy. Thank the Lord. I haven't had corona at all. Like, I've successfully avoided it till now. Like, bless on wood. And those are things to be actually grateful for. And when you start your day in that type of thinking, not even like, sometimes I'm even grateful for my failures. This is a really unknown fact, but in my job, I got rejected for Crno once. Yeah. And I got really swift rejections. I honestly got a rejection like 3 days ago. They're like, hey, you're not the content writer we're looking for. Great, move on. If it's not meant to be, something else will come. And that's the beauty of life, because all the time something comes in. And it doesn't matter if it's 19 universities in the US or if it's a content writer job, something is going to come out. And we need to learn to disconnect failures to the meaning of our lives, because especially professional failures happen, and it's a good thing that professional failures happen. Right now I'm talking to like 20 investors and I can't get one of them on a call because I'm young. Like, the last time I was on a sales call, people were like, hey, aren't you too young to be a saleswoman? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I might not have the experience, but I have something. And that's the thing that you should hold on to. That and journaling. I mean, especially with failures, it helps a lot. But let's get back a little bit to faculty. Like, I'm really really fascinated about that. So for us who are not into science at all, what is it that you actually study? What is astrophysics in general?
Well, astrophysics, I mean, again, as I said, it connects astronomy and physics. So it's like studying astronomy and astronomical objects. So studying from the smallest objects, so that's planetary systems, so planets and moons, um, to stars, galaxies, and like further structures and like different objects that there are in galaxies. So it's not just like stars and planets, but like there is different types of stars, there are different types of objects and nebula and so on. And it's studying their evolution, so the birth, how they are forming, their entire life and their death, and as well as like connecting it with physics, it's studying like their physical properties. So from a physical standpoint, it's evaluating all of this like astronomical properties with like physical laws. So that's like a short what astrophysics means. But like when it comes to like studying astrophysics, it's way less, the astronomy stuff. It's way less looking at the
Zodiac.
sky, planets, and galaxies, and it's more just maths and physics. Like even like my physics courses are mostly like 70% just mathematics.
Oh, man.
So yeah, it's a lot of math.
What else do you do outside of faculty? What is something that you love to do, and maybe in a way is connected to what? Also, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Okay, so let me, I don't know how to connect. Okay, let me just like answer the first question first. So for me, like, I feel like what's the most important thing that I want to do outside of, school is volunteering. I love helping people, and like I've been volunteering since like I was a child, and fighting for like different causes and all throughout my high school experience. And I'm volunteering now. I took a break when I was in Slovenia, but I'm volunteering now. I'm in ISA right now, and I'm a project manager, and I'm specifically working for a project about climate change.
Oh,
And for me, that's really important because like one of the connecting it with your second question, once I went into like astrophysics and like I started studying and seeing like a research environment, I was like, this is not for me. And that's like so crazy to think like this was something I wanted for so long, and suddenly I'm in that environment, and I was like, this academia and research environment is not for me, because like there is like this thing that a lot of like people in academia are pushing, that you should study science and like STEM in general for the sake of what you're studying, for the sake of like gaining knowledge. And like I literally had professor, when I was like talking about what I want to do further on with my career, he was like, you should not try to make impact with your scientific research. And I was like, no. I was like really against that idea, and that's like an idea a lot of like scientists are pushing. And for me, like once I get in there, I just like realized that I have to work with people. Like that's something I love doing. I mean, I'm very social, I'm very extroverted, and like that's also combining with that. But for me, it brings like the most important thing, like find what I find meaning in life is to help other people, to know that I've made impact in humanity in some kind of way, and knowing that I have that, like I can use my intelligence and like my potential and use my scientific research to help people. It's like, you recognize how powerful tool science has been, and like how much it has changed the course of humanity, and not using it for good and to make like impact in the world is absurd for me. And like whatever people say, I'm just like still gonna go with that mindset, that like I want to use my scientific research and potential, for good. So that's why I just like, although I love astronomy, and I love astrophysics, I've decided like to continue my master's and PhD into nuclear engineering.
wow.
And yeah,
Oh, wow.
it's a completely different direction, but for me, again, connecting with like climate change, and I see it as one of the biggest threats we are facing right now. I just feel like I have to do something to contribute to it. And nuclear energy is one of like the best energy source that we can. And I really want to use my career to further like nuclear energy, and to like set it as the primary source of energy. So like to stop using fossil fuels and to focus more on nuclear energy. Of course, other renewables, but no other energy source is as good and as green as nuclear is. And I will specifically work not on the type of reactors that we know now, which work on fusion, which is like dividing these big atoms like uranium and splitting them in like smaller, but on the other type of nuclear reactions, which is fusion, which is like combining these like small atoms, like hydrogen atoms, which are just protons, and combining them to create energy. And that's fun fact, the process which like stars shine because of nuclear fusion and combining like protons or hydrogen atoms into helium. All stars shine because of these reactions, and that's like what scientists are trying to create now on Earth. So create a sun here on Earth. It's a bit of a different process than the one is happening in the stars, but it's a really fascinating field of research. It's really interesting, also from like a scientific standpoint, but the impact it will have on humanity, and if we like manage to make it happen, to make it stable, and then to commercialize it and spread it all around the world, like build these nuclear fusion reactors, it will really change the course of humanity, and we will have another source of energy that's really powerful instead of like fossil fuel. So yeah, that's when I want to focus like my future scientific career. That's one what I want to be when I grow up. And for with that, like I will, combine like my love of science, but also my love of helping people. And I feel like with that, like combining these two, combining both empathy and like logic, I can make the biggest impact.
Wow. I mean, the last thing that we just talked about is so fascinating. Like, I want to ask you, like, this is probably a really extreme question, but I'm just really interested in this. So, do you have any predictions on what will the Earth be, let's say, in 30, 40 years when it comes to all of this? Like, where is science right now and where is it going to go?
Well, the thing with science, I feel like we're like it's really evolving fast. It's really going in a very it's very moving forward, and like honestly, technology and engineering are cannot keep up with it. Like it's they're really like catching up to a lot of the scientific knowledge that has been like even discovered in the last century, but I think it's like really moving forward. And again, as I said, for me, what will determine where we are headed, where we'll be in the 30, 40 years, as much as it's hard to say, I don't think it's going to be science. I think it's going to be politics. I think it's going to be like this much larger players. Because like the reality also for me, in nuclear, it's not that we do not have nuclear because there is no capacity, that there is no scientific research, is because there are no money given to nuclear fusion research. And this is a fun fact, but like the amount of money that's given to science, to nuclear fusion research specifically in the United States is in 1 year is the amount that it's given to peanut subsidies. So given to farmers that have like are growing peanuts. And that's crazy to think. This is just like peanut subsidies that are given to farmer, and that same amount is given to nuclear fusion research. And as I said now, it can like literally change the trajectory. Like in all the circles where it's talked about nuclear fusion, it's considered the holy grail of energy. And yet so little money is given to it. And again, like when people think of nuclear energy, they think of something scary. They think of like Chernobyl or the nuclear bombs. And there was this growing like propaganda, especially after disasters as Chernobyl, to give like fear to people when it comes to nuclear. And that's why it's not growing as much. Nuclear as a can be a much bigger energy source, and it's not, more because of like political reasons. So for me, it's not like science is growing, and it will always be growing because, as I said, like scientists will do science no matter the impact they will be making. But if we want to make sure that there is a progress that being made, that all these issues, and that we really utilize science and engineering as tools, that it comes also to politics. And that's why I also connect with like why it's such problematic to for scientists to not to be so exclusive when it comes to their circles, and to be just like focused on science, because it's not up to them. A lot of scientific research is funded by people, it's funded by the government. And for you to not care of how that research will be used is very selfish, because like it doesn't depend just on you. It doesn't depend, your research can be amazing, but if there is no interest, if there is no interest in the public, and people are not like supporting scientific research, the government will not fund your research. It can be make a huge impact, but if there is no support from the government, then nothing is going to happen. So I feel like that's more on the scientific side, and from like scientists and academia in general, we need to care about like what people are thinking. We need to care that like people understand the research we are doing, they understand science, and most importantly, they have trust in scientists, because we have a growing distrust in like the scientific community, as also like the whole vaccination and COVID has shown. So I feel like that's more up to scientists to really, that we really need to care. that what people are thinking and how the public is perceiving science, and that we are reaching them with our research and that they know it. So then they can support it. I mean, the government, and then we have funding. So I feel like, again, as I said, to connect it, I am very optimistic. I wanna like think that the world will be in a better place in 40, 50 years. But again, it's not just up to science. I think it's also to all of us, also like from my side as a scientist, to like spread my knowledge, to the general public, but also to all of us, to have a trust in the scientific process, and support um, public funding for science.
Wow. Well, I mean, all of this is just it. First of all, it's so much information to process, especially being a non-scientific person. Wow. I mean, in a way, you're talking about marketing, I guess. Like, what I would just like to conclude this whole thing is just like you need to have better marketing for scientific purposes. So you guys need to hire like an agency or something to, like spread the message. But I really hope that this podcast also comes to those years and you actually get a lot of support in what you do. And maybe for some final remarks, like what is something that has impacted you personally, like in school, out of school, what is something that has really changed the way you think? Like the way we mentioned journaling, like is there some kind of, I don't know, some kind of book or some kind of podcast or anything that you would like to recommend to anyone?
When it comes to books, this is not like actually a scientific book.
Mhm.
Well, actually, I'm gonna mention like two books, and the one is from Bill Bryson, which is this is a scientific book. It's a brief history of nearly everything. So it actually talks about the history of everything. It starts from the Big Bang to where we are now. It covers a lot, like a lot of topics. So it's a really interesting book. It doesn't delve like very deep into the topics, but it was very interesting. And even I have a lot of like knowledge in science, learned a lot from that book. And the second book is from uh, Yuval Noah Harari. I think that was his name. I
Homo
love that
sapiens,
author.
right?
I've read all of his books. He's really brilliant. I love the work that he is doing, and definitely like his first book, which is Homo sapiens. It's really fascinating, and it has really changed the way I like view the world. So I would definitely recommend these two books. They're both like a short history of a lot of things. The one is more of just from a scientific perspective, and the other one is more from like a social science perspective, like the history and sociology and so on. But they're both like an extremely good books, and I would recommend for everyone to read them. It does give a quick overview, but enough to get you interested in these topics and like discover more by yourself.
That's great. That's great. So do you have any closing remarks? Like what is something that you want to tell our audience, everyone listening and watching?
Oh, well, that's hard. I guess I wanna tell a lot to the people, but what I would always give as advice is to really always, try to grow and learn. That's something that never stops. Those are processes that are ongoing. Can never know everything. You can never be fully grown. So, just continue like examining yourself, examining the world, and trying to become better and better, and really reach your full potential.
Aw, that is just so beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining for this episode of Soph Rants. And Bojana, where can people find you if they want to talk to you about nuclear physics or, habits or failures? Like, where can people find you?
Yeah, well, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. I'm Bojana Stefanoska, or LinkedIn, if people want to reach me on a
Yeah,
more
the
professional
professional
level.
network.
So
Woo!
yeah, whatever people want to talk about, I'm available, always for a good conversation. So yeah, reach out.
Awesome. Well, thanks for everyone for listening, watching, connecting wherever you are. We hope that you're safe in these troubling times. And this is something that we've been saying for the last year, but oh well, it has to be said. And if you like this video, like it, subscribe to our channel. We have interesting conversations all the time, unless I disappear for 4 months and go on a hiatus or something. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.